The Galactic Council had long feared a war like this. Over the past decades, alliances had shattered, and once peaceful factions had turned against each other. The battle for Sci-Fi 7 was supposed to be decisive, a massive clash between two of the strongest fleets in the sector. But tonight, something far more dangerous had entered the battlefield. Admiral Vorik of the Xanthi Dominion sat in the command chair of his battleship, the Zalkur, his claws tapping impatiently against the armrest. His fleet, over 300 warships strong, was positioned in a tight formation, waiting for the enemy, the Varnock Collective, to arrive. Status report, Vorik growled, his deep voice echoing across the bridge. Admiral, his tactical officer, Saris, responded nervously. Enemy fleet detected. They are moving into position, but we have a problem. Vorik's eyes narrowed. What kind of problem? Saris hesitated before answering. There is another ship in the system. It arrived without any warp signature. It is not Varnock, and it is not ours. Vorik's claws stopped tapping. Then who does it belong to? Silence filled the bridge. The Xanthi Dominion had fought countless battles over the years. They had faced the best fleets the galaxy had to offer. But nothing, not even the Varnock's most advanced warships, could enter a star system undetected. The answer came from another officer. Sir, we just received an identification code from the unknown ship. Vorik turned his gaze toward the main display screen, where a single name appeared in bold, red text. UNS Nemesis. A wave of unease washed over the crew. Even those unfamiliar with human military strength could feel the weight of that name. Vorik clenched his jaw. A human warship. Here. Size. Weapons. He demanded. Saris quickly checked the readings. Unknown. Our scanners cannot penetrate its hull. Vorik felt a chill creep down his spine. Every ship, no matter how advanced, could be scanned to some degree. But this nemesis, it was like trying to see through a black hole. What are they doing? Saris stared at her console for a long moment before responding. Nothing, sir. It's just sitting there. The bridge fell silent once more. Outside the viewport, in the cold void of space, the battle for Sci-Fi 7 was about to begin. But the real threat wasn't moving. It didn't have to. For the first time in his career, Admiral Vorik wondered if he was already fighting a battle he had no chance of winning. The battlefield of Sci-Fi 7 was set. Two great fleets, the Xanthi Dominion and the Varnock Collective, stood at the brink of war, but neither side had expected a third player to arrive. At the center of the star system, floating like a silent predator, was a single warship. Its dark hull reflected no light, absorbing every scan that tried to pierce its defenses. It hadn't announced itself. It hadn't fired a single shot. Yet its presence was enough to make every commander in the sector uneasy. On board the Xanthi flagship, Zalkur, Admiral Vorik stared at the main tactical display, his claws gripping the edges of his command seat. This isn't possible, he muttered. A human warship. In our space. His officers exchanged nervous glances. Human ships didn't operate this deep in the galaxy. They were mostly confined to their own sector, defending their so-called death world, Earth. But here it was. The nemesis. Vorik turned to his communication officer. Hail them. A sharp chirp filled the air as the request was sent. No response. He clenched his jaw. Again. Still, nothing. The Xanthi fleet had crushed dozens of opponents, annihilating entire civilizations without hesitation. But something about this human vessel, a single ship against hundreds, felt different. Finally, the silence broke. The tactical officer, Saris, spoke in a hushed voice. Sir, the nemesis just sent a transmission. Vorik's heart pounded. Put it on screen. The display flickered to life. The bridge crew stiffened at what they saw. It wasn't a human commander. It wasn't a demand for surrender. It was a single message, written in the common galactic language. Li-AV. One word. A warning. Vorik's blood ran cold. The humans weren't asking for diplomacy. They were giving an order. He turned to his second-in-command. "Prepare the fleet. If they want war, we'll give it to them." Outside, the battle for Sci-Fi 7 was about to begin. But no one knew if they would survive long enough to fight it. The first mistake was assuming the Nemesis wouldn't fire first. Admiral Vorik watched the screen, his claws tapping impatiently against the armrest of his command chair. The Nemesis remained eerily silent, floating like a ghost in the void. Its dark hull refused to reflect any light, making it look more like a shadow than a warship. The Xanthi Dominion was the strongest military force in this region. They had conquered dozens of worlds, reduced fleets to scrap, and crushed rebellions before they could begin. And yet, one human warship had the entire fleet holding its breath. Vorik narrowed his eyes. Enough of this. Target the human ship. Lock weapons. His tactical officer hesitated. "Sir, they haven't." "I don't care," Vorik snapped. They had their chance to leave. "Fire." A moment later, the void was filled with blinding streaks of plasma and high-energy torpedoes. Every gun, every cannon, every missile was launched at the Nemesis. The attack should have wiped the ship from existence. It should have ended the battle before it began. But it didn't. The Xanthi bridge crew watched in horror as every single projectile vanished before reaching its target. Vorik's eyes widened. What happened? Saris, his second-in-command, checked the data feed. "Sir, the Nemesis deployed some kind of defensive field. I don't understand it. The energy readings." Before she could finish, the human warship moved. And that was when everything changed. One moment, it was floating silently. The next, it was inside their formation. No engine flare, no visible thrusters, just pure, terrifying speed. Vorik barely had time to shout a command before the first explosion rocked his ship. The Nemesis hadn't fired traditional weapons. It had sliced through the Xanthi fleet with pinpoint precision, cutting key ships in half, shredding carriers, and disabling dreadnoughts in seconds. The Xanthi fleet had been prepared for war. They weren't prepared for this. On board the Nemesis, Captain Elias Grayson stood calmly on his bridge, watching the destruction unfold. His crew operated in perfect silence, executing each maneuver with terrifying efficiency. The enemy had fired first. That was their mistake. Now, Nemesis would show them why humans weren't to be underestimated. The mighty Xanthi fleet, once an unstoppable force, was in ruins. The wreckage of their warships drifted in space, broken and lifeless. Fires still burned in the oxygen-rich sections of shattered hulls. Escape pods ejected from doomed vessels, their crews abandoning ship in sheer terror. Admiral Vorik's command ship, the Dominion's Wrath, was one of the last remaining capital ships still functional. But even that was barely holding together. Sparks flew from broken control panels. The bridge was filled with the smell of burnt metal and ozone. Vorik gripped the armrest of his chair, his claws digging deep into the reinforced material. His second-in-command, Saris, was shaking, her eyes locked onto the massive screen in front of them. The Nemesis was still there, silent, watching. It hadn't taken a single scratch. This isn't possible," Saris whispered. "How?" "We had the numbers. We had superior firepower." Vorik clenched his jaw. "We underestimated them." A soft chime echoed through the bridge, an incoming transmission. From the Nemesis. The entire crew went still. No one spoke, no one breathed. Vorik hesitated, then nodded to the communications officer. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and a human appeared. Captain Elias Grayson stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. His uniform was immaculate, his posture relaxed. He looked more like a teacher about to give a lecture than a warrior who had just obliterated an entire fleet. "Admiral Vorik," Grayson said, his voice calm. "I assume you're ready to talk now." Vorik forced himself to sit up straighter. His pride screamed at him to refuse, to fight to the bitter end. But he knew better. His fleet was gone. his forces decimated, and the Nemesis had barely even tried. With a deep breath, he gave the only order that made sense. "All remaining ships," Vorik said, his voice hollow. "Stand down." There was no point in fighting anymore. But one thought haunted his mind. If one human warship could do this, what would happen if they ever sent a fleet? Admiral Vorik had given the order to stand down, but his officers sat frozen, staring at the massive warship that had single-handedly crushed their entire fleet. The Nemesis. The human captain, Elias Grayson, was still on screen, his expression calm yet unreadable. His ship hadn't moved, hadn't fired another shot, hadn't done anything since the slaughter ended. And that was even more terrifying. "What now?" whispered Saris, her voice barely above a breath. Vorik swallowed hard. He knew the answer. Surrender. Negotiate. Pray. But before he could speak, a new alert blared through the bridge. A transmission, not from the Nemesis, but from their own high command. The screen shifted, and a new face appeared. Supreme Warlord Kairos, leader of the Xanthi Dominion, his reptilian features twisted in rage, his golden eyes burning. "Admiral Vorik." Kairos snarled, his voice dripping with fury. "Explain yourself." Vorik took a steadying breath. "My lord, the battle is lost. The human warship." "Enough excuses." Kairos slammed his fist on the armrest of his throne. "You dare surrender? You disgrace the Xanthi name." Vorik's claws tightened on his chair. He had fought for his people for over 20 years. He had crushed rebellions, conquered star systems, but never had he faced anything like this. "My lord," he tried again, "this is not an ordinary enemy. This warship." Silence. Kairos' gaze flickered to something off-screen. Then his lips curled in a cruel smile. "No more weakness. No more failure. You have lost the right to command." Vorik's blood ran cold. A moment later, a new figure stepped onto the screen. A young, ambitious Xanthi warlord named Terek Velkor. Vorik's stomach twisted. He knew what was coming. Kairos spoke again, his voice eerily calm. "Admiral Vorik, you are relieved of duty." The transmission cut off, and then security alarms blared across the bridge. Vorik turned just in time to see Xanthi enforcers storm into the room. Their weapons raised. A coup. Saris gasped. Officers scrambled to react, but Vorik did not move. He had expected this. One of the enforcers, a young lieutenant he had trained himself, raised a blaster to his chest. "This is treason," Saris hissed. Vorik exhaled slowly. "No," he murmured. "This is politics." A single shot rang out. Admiral Vorik fell. The crew froze in shock. Blood pooled beneath their fallen leader, his gaze still locked on the screen where the Nemesis loomed. Silent. Watching. Waiting. Terek Velkor stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He turned to the crew and spoke a single, chilling order. "Ready all weapons." The war wasn't over. Not yet. The bridge of the Xanthi flagship was tense. Officers sat frozen as Terek Velkor took command, his golden eyes burning with determination. Admiral Vorik was dead, executed by his own people. And now, under direct orders from Supreme Warlord Kairos, the fleet would not surrender. They would fight. "Prepare all weapons," Terek ordered, his voice cold. Saris hesitated. "Sir, the Nemesis destroy our entire fleet in minutes. If we attack—" "I did not ask for your fear," Terek snapped. "I asked for your loyalty." Saris clenched her jaw, but she obeyed. Weapons systems activated. Shields powered up. The Xanthi fleet was damaged, crippled, but not broken. The bridge lights flickered as energy surged through the ship. Terek turned toward the screen, staring at the Nemesis, the single human warship that had decimated them. It had not fired another shot. It was waiting. "Foolish humans," Terek muttered. "They should have finished us when they had the chance." Saris stiffened. "Sir, incoming transmission," from the Nemesis. A cold silence filled the bridge. Tarek's claws tapped against the console. The humans wanted to talk. Interesting. Put it through, he ordered. The screen shifted. Captain Elias Grayson appeared. His face was calm, unreadable. His uniform was crisp, unshaken by battle. Behind him, the dim glow of the Nemesis's war rune flickered, a silent reminder of the ship's terrifying power. Tarek leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "So, you finally speak." Grayson tilted his head slightly. Admiral Vorik was a reasonable man. You are not. Tarek smirked. Vorik was weak. No, Grayson said simply. He was smart. A beat of silence. Then, Grayson's voice turned cold. You just made the worst mistake of your life. Tarek's smirk faltered. Grayson leaned closer. Vorik was ready to surrender. He knew what your people still refuse to understand. This war is already over. Tarek's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. We are Xanthi. We do not bow. Grayson sighed. Then you will burn. The transmission cut off. A single alert blared across the bridge. Saris's voice trembled. Sir, they're charging weapons. Tarek's breath caught. He had expected hesitation. A standoff. Not this. Humans were supposed to negotiate. Instead, they were about to end him. The Xanthi flagship trembled as alarms blared across the bridge. The Nemesis had locked onto them. Tarek Velkor stared at the screen, his golden eyes wide. This was not how it was supposed to go. Humans were supposed to hesitate. They were supposed to offer one last chance. But Captain Elias Grayson had already given that chance. And now, the Nemesis was preparing to fire. Sir, our shields are down to 12%, Saris whispered. Tarek's claws dug into his chair. His fleet was broken, scattered. His allies had fled. He had no reinforcements, no escape. Yet his pride screamed at him. Load all torpedoes, he ordered. Target the human ship. We will not die as cowards. Saris didn't move. Do it, he roared. She shook her head. We're already dead, sir. Tarek turned sharply. But before he could react, the screen flashed red. The Nemesis had fired. A beam of pure destruction cut through space. The flagship's hull melted instantly, the shields crumbling like paper. The impact was silent, absolute. The Xanthi command ship, once the pride of the fleet, vanished in a blinding explosion. Tarek Velkor's final scream was lost in the void. On the Nemesis's bridge, silence fell. Captain Grayson watched the explosion through the main viewport. The battle was over. The Xanthi had chosen war, and they had paid the price. A soft alert beeped on his console. The Xanthi survivors were sending out distress signals. Their remaining ships powered down their weapons. They were surrendering. Grayson exhaled. It was done. Stand down, he ordered. No more killing. Let them go. The crew nodded silently. They had won, not just through firepower, but by breaking the enemy's will. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread like wildfire. The Xanthi Empire, once unstoppable, was now in retreat. One human warship had crushed their mightiest fleet. And now, every species in the universe understood one thing. Humanity was not to be challenged. Because when humans go to war, they do not stop until it's over. And when it's over, only they are left standing.